Hello friends, my name is Dr. Robert. I have a PhD on the Beatles and my subject is their lyrics. As you can see, July is winter here in Australia and I'm wearing a jumper. In the UK they also call it a jersey or a cardigan, and where I was born, in South Africa, it was a jersey. In North America it's a sweater, but here we're in Beatle land. And the Aussies have it right, it's a jumper. How do we know? Well, John Lennon wrote a magical song, I Am the Walrus, one of his most magical, and in it has the line, Oompa Loompa, stick it up your jumper. And you might suppose that he was inspired by Willy Wonka and Roald Dahl's book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. However, unfortunately, you'd be wrong if you made that supposition. It came from somewhere else. It came from one of only about 6 people who are actually named in a Beatles lyric. Of those 6, there is one who's an outlier, who is certainly the weirdest, the most comically strange, and in his own unique way, absolutely unforgettable. His name is Charles Hawtrey. And he said that before John wrote the song, which was around September 1967. The moral of this channel is seek and ye shall find. And if you do seek in the filmography of Charles Hawtrey, you will find him saying those immortal words. They probably inspired him to engage with his son and laugh at Charles Hawtrey, laugh at the words, read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. John did the same thing with Cry Baby Cry. We hear the 4 and 20 Blackbirds, so we know that John was talking to Julian about childhood poetry, but most of that song is not actually concerned with the 4 and 20 Blackbirds, but it relates to a serial which on the back page of a magazine for little children that used to be published in the UK during that time, I have a copy, and for me it's a treasure. And the story is called The Kingdom of Marigold Land. And you will find the things that he talks about in the song as relates to that serial. Similarly, even when he was 3, little Julian was inspiring his father with his paintings. John was very interested in his son, both his paintings and his verbal mind. We see that with Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which was inspired by a painting of his. The verbal mind we see again with John's favourite childhood book, which he took all the way through his adult years, the Lewis Carroll Alice books, and in particular through The Looking Glass, which inspired both the Walrus and the Eggman. So John loved to engage with his son. He also used to sing to him, and he composed a song which became Julian's bedtime song, and it's called Good Night. And one can imagine John singing it with his guitar, which is how he first presented it to the Beatles, and then he gave it to Ringo, and it got an overly syrupy orchestral backing, and I think it lost some of its simple beauty. But the thing about all these things that we've been talking about is that John was an active parent. He wasn't what he's often portrayed as, which is somewhat disengaged with his son Julian. He was active until and including April 1968. And then in May, he decided to break up his family and move on with a new woman, Yoko Ono. And those days with Julian ended. And shortly after that, he forbade anyone in the Beatles circle from visiting Julian and Cynthia, his wife. And the one person who would never stand for that was Paul McCartney. And as soon as he heard of the ban, he got in the car and drove to their home and visited Cynthia and Julian. And while he was on the way, he came up with an idea of a song. Hey Jules, don't make it bad, take a sad song and make it better. And that was the genesis of Hey Jude. It might also relate to the meaning of the song, we don't know. But today I will show you why Hey Jude was for me the absolute turning point in my life in terms of interest in lyrics and interest in the Beatles, and how it inspired me or caused me to have to really look much more deeply into the lyrics, because there are things in Hey Jude that simply don't make sense. None of the Beatles' explanations stack up. So we'll look at those things, the challenges within the lyrics of the song and the explanations. But first of all, I thought I'd give you a bit of background into myself so you can appreciate just how important it was for me to get on top of Hey Jude, to find out what's going on in it. So yes, I was born in South Africa during the Apartheid time, and all I'll say about it from a personal perspective is that when I was 13, I came to deeply appreciate that the whole system was evil, and I set my entire teenage years to one focus only, which was to recover my health and intellectual capabilities from a terrible, debilitating illness I'd had, so that I could leave the country. And I left the country at age 21. So I am no friend of apartheid, never was. It was the system of government by the Afrikaner majority of the white people. They believed in a form of Calvinism, which included the idea that the whites were, by God's creation, superior creatures. And so they followed the German racial theory, the Nazi German racial theory. However, they did not practice genocide. Instead, what they did is they disenfranchised and decitizenized all the black people of South Africa and made them citizens of these homelands scattered around the country. And so they had to ask, as if foreigners, for the right to come and work in the factories and in the cities in South Africa. And this system was such a reprehensible system that it was subject to universal boycotts. The relevance of the boycotts to today's discussion is that it was also included an almost comprehensive cultural boycott. Nobody visited the place, nobody performed there, it was just not known. During my whole lifetime of growing up there, I can only remember two foreign acts performing there, the Trogs and Percy Sledge. And Percy Sledge, everybody loved Percy Sledge. So there was no sense of occasion, no concerts, no visits, no tours, nothing like that. People's charisma was irrelevant to us because we never got to experience it. Also, television was banned by the Afrikaner people, so they thought it was Satan's work, television, and so it was completely banned. We'd never get television until 1976 when they finally relented. We had no contact with people who were artistic other than through their creations. We could see the movies, we could listen to the music. So music had to stand on its own merits, but the people who bought records seemed to have very good taste. For example, the Beatles really made it in South Africa before they even really made it in the UK. From Me to You was such a huge hit there that it became the record of the year, and it took the next hit, She Loves You, to be reach the same status in the UK. So by the time She Loves You came out, everybody in South Africa, even little 6-year-olds who had no knowledge of music, knew Love Me Do and Please Please Me and From Me to You. I can remember when I was 6, was my younger brother's last day at kindergarten. There was a big party. We all were there in the jumble gym, in the sand pits, and in the music room. We were all playing around to She Loves You, and it's an unforgettable memory for me. And my interest in the Beatles sort of ended with A Hard Day's Night. And then I went back to what my mother was interested in. She was Swiss, and so we were always exposed to high culture German music, Bach, the Brandenburg concertos, the St. Matthew's Passion, things like that, the German Lieder, a bit of Mozart, Mendelssohn, and then two Italians, Monteverdi and Vivaldi, and that was the people I grew up with. And my breakfast, lunch and dinner was Engelbert Humperdinck. And then when I was 11, in December 1968, everything suddenly changed. My best friend David had borrowed a single from his cousin George, and he asked me if I wanted to listen to it with him, and we put it on. And this was the first time I developed really my own musical mind. and I was blown away by this single. It was Street Fighting Man by the Rolling Stones, and after that came 1969 with the most wonderful music. It's so wonderful that in my Beatles class I devote an entire half year to the music of 1969, playing the songs and just talking briefly about each one of them for 1.5 hours each week, half a year. That's how great it was. Elvis came back, there's a Neil Diamond started, Led Zeppelin started, the Archies gave us Sugar Sugar, Hair came out. I fell in love with Three Dog Night and Easy to Be Hard, but also Aquarius. The songs at the end of the year were Bee Gees singing Don't Forget to Remember, and Diana Ross and the Supremes singing Someday We'll Be Together. Creedence Clearwater Revival were the biggest in our house. And also I think in South Africa, the first hit, Pride Mary, got to number 2, and then the next 3 all were huge number 1s there. I don't think either of them made to number 1 in the USA. But yes, Green River, Bad Moon Rising, and Down on the Corner, all number 1s, wonderful songs. That was 69. But there were no Beatles, because in 1966, John Lennon had compared the Beatles to Jesus Christ, and from that point onwards, all Beatles stuff was banned on the radio in South Africa, could not be heard. Same thing occurred in Spain and in many parts of the United States. The radio stations banned them, but in South Africa it was a government ban, so you didn't get to hear the Beatles. Then, on the 28th of February 1970, my father was a senior executive at the Central News Agency, CNA, and he needed to go to Commissioner Street, as you can see there, to the CNA head office to do some work. And my brother and I decided to accompany him, because downstairs was Africa's largest stationery and diary store, that sort of stuff. Below it, in the basement, was Africa's biggest bookstore, a tremendous place of joy for me. And to the rear, behind the stationery store, down about 10 stairs, on the right hand side was a record store, and on the left hand side was posters. And the records were arranged in 2 racks, 2 long white racks of 3 tiers each on both sides, so 6 tiers in all, and between the 2 racks was a place you could go through to the counter that was against the right hand wall. And my brother was browsing A, B, C's, and I was on the K, L, M's, and I can remember it as clearly as that. And I had just been looking at the Moody Blues albums, their wonderful album artwork, and I was holding in my hand the cover of King Crimson's wonderful first album. It's a grotesque cover, it's so amazing, In the Court of the Crimson King, when some music came on. And this music was, the German Lieder. There's some exquisite pieces in the German Lieder, but this music exceeded anything I'd ever heard in terms of compassion, kindness, and in a gentle way it encourages you to start doing something. And I was mesmerized. I had never been so touched by music as these wonderful verses. And I just sat there and quietly listened for about 3 minutes. And then I went to my brother. Now he was 16 months younger than me, but I had had serious childhood illnesses and I was somewhat out of it. I didn't really know what was going on. And so I asked him, Peter, who is this? What is this wonderful music? I've never heard anything like it. And he said, don't you know? It's the Beatles playing Hey Jude. And of course I didn't know, because they were banned, and he must have heard it at a party or with some friends, I don't know. But I didn't know. And then I went to the counter, and this is what I saw at the counter. I saw this album here, the Bee Gees' Cucumber Castle, which, if you need to have a sad day, and I think all of us do sometimes, this is the greatest album to be your friend on a sad day. It's the most miserable album. It's wonderfully sad. It was made at the time when Morris and Robin, the 2 twins, were no longer together, and Morris went with Barry and Robin went solo for about 1.5 years, and this is Morris and Barry. So the sadness of the fights in the Bee Gees is reflected in the music, although their actual story is not. And next to it was the brand new album, which is how I can date this to the 28th of February, the brand new album by the Beatles, Hey Jude. And as I was approaching the counter, the song erupted into this amazingly joyous moment. And gosh, if it was wonderful beforehand, the sense of transcendence, the sense of emergent joy, and yet it's so transient, and it's not triumphant, it's not I've won, it's not that sort of joy, it's just almost discovering God or discovering yourself or something like that. It's the most wonderful moment, and I have never heard its like in music. I've searched. The closest I've ever found is Richard Wagner's Entry of the Gods to Valhalla from Das Rheingold, his first ring opera. And it starts with Thor wielding his hammer and then thrusting it down with the mightiest crash to draw the storm down. And then as the storm clears, there emerges the rainbow bridge, and the gods, which is Odin or Wotan, his wife, his daughter, and his two sons, walk up the rainbow bridge to their new castle Valhalla in the sky. And that music is also sublime, but it's much longer. It's 6 minutes compared to less than half a minute with Hey Jude. So it's not the same sort of thing, but it's the closest analogy I can find. I invite you to write in the comments if you think there's another piece that's equivalent for you. I'm sure there must be. I spent the next 20 years wondering what the lyrics were about. The more I thought about it, the less it made sense. And yet I was convinced this song is asking you, repeated, to begin something that involves letting her into your heart and under your skin, but that's not it. Because when you do that, then you get better. So something about the relationship or whatever's going on in that song, but it's not clear what it is. And the song has enough contradictions in it for you not even to be sure that it's about a person. So I was not able to work it out. And then after 20 years, one day, the penny dropped. It all fell into place. And that's when I began to study the Beatles in depth to find out if it was a pattern, like Paul says, a secret code. I didn't think in terms of a secret code. Eventually, after my studies, I realized, oh my gosh, the Beatles have a way of talking to each other through their lyrics that no one's picked up on. A private conversation in the public domain. How incredible. And then I thought, I'll test that academically because this is such a crazy finding. And so I enrolled at Monash University, and they said to me, no, before you do that, you have to do a history postgraduate, so you're in the philosophy and practice of history. And I did that in 1998, and then I did my PhD in 1999-2000. And initially it wasn't going to be a PhD, it was just a master's degree, because all I wanted was validation. But they upgraded me. They said, no, it's too long and it's too important, and so I am legitimately Dr. Robert. So here's the lyrics of Hey Jude. It has 6 sections. There's quite a lot of repetition, or seeming repetition. Every verse is slightly different. There's 2 bridges, the third and the fifth. The first thing I do when I look at a lyric is I see if I can find a draft. And there is a draft. It comes from this book. We talked about this last week. Last week I explained to you that this book's very useful, but also inadequate. Last week I showed you that it includes the lyric, in John's handwritten written lyric, very early, of Strawberry Fields Forever. It's by no means all of the song, but the key sentence, which everybody seems to get wrong, John's written it correctly in his draft. And yet, right next to it, Hunter Davies has transcribed that lyric, and he gets it wrong. Now in Hey Jude, it's a different thing. Paul's draft lyric has these lines: she has found you, now make it better. He changed the lyric to you have found her, now go and get her. He has the draft lyric as the final lyric. So he's done the opposite of what he did in Strawberry Fields Forever. It's typical of the really shoddy editing in this book. However, what we see from that is that Paul initially realized that's a problem. She has found you, because everywhere else the narrator is asking the person they're talking to act. It's always act, act, act. He simplified that to be just an instruction to act. Go out and get her. You found her, you did something about it. Now, carry on developing that idea. So I think he made a correct choice. It doesn't really change the lyric, it just makes it more purposeful. And this is the thing, the whole lyric has the sense of purpose. The other change was, Hey Jude was initially Hey Jules, as you can see by that red arrow on the first line. Hey Jude, Jules don't make it bad. It was about Julian. And then the last change in the lyric is two changes on one line. Don't carry the world upon your shoulder. Paul was toying. He wasn't quite sure whether he should have don't carry your life upon your shoulder. That would have upped the ante, as it were. That would have made it exactly equivalent to you were made to go out and get her. In other words, this is your defining thing. But he backed off a bit and got a more generic line. He went settle for the world. And he also had shoulders initially. Now the draft lyric takes us up to that dotted line. We don't know from that draft lyric, and neither does Barry Miles, whether Paul hadn't written the rest or whether it was on another piece of paper that is subsequently lost. We don't know. The line immediately after the draft is one that you could hear one way or another. Hey Jude, you'll do, or Hey Jude, you do. Either makes sense syntactically and also semantically, so it doesn't really change the lyric. The most interesting thing on the lyric, however, is something that never makes any of the transcriptions, and that is the two parts in red boxes. So just before the song reaches its peak, there is a recording placed of Paul's vocals, actually, placed underneath Paul's main vocals. So it's not superimposed, it's underneath it, much softer. And it goes like this: remember to let her under your skin. Oh, then you begin, effing hell, to make it better, better, better. Now, initially I didn't even hear the swear word. I heard it as make it now, but it comes to the same thing. Everyone who's commented on that has said it was someone who made a mistake while playing the music. And we have a number of choices that you can read. Every one of these has been stated as fact. George played the wrong note on his electric guitar. Not possible, because George is not playing his electric guitar at that point. John broke a string on his acoustic guitar. Not possible, because if he broke a string, we'd hear it throughout the rest of the song, because he's playing the chords. John played the wrong chord at that point. It's possible, although no one has ever heard it. And lastly, Paul played the wrong chord on his piano. Again, it's possible, but no one's ever heard it. And in 2021, seemingly closing the matter, Paul McCartney has said in the lyrics, his book from that year, that he did the swearing, he played the wrong chord. So that would seem to close the matter. It's a pure mistake. But it's not. Paul's not telling the truth. In fact, if you want to go to the truth, there is a Bible in the Beatles, and it is this thing. It's called The Complete Beatles Recording Sessions by Mark Lewisham. He listened to and summarized the key events in every session. And his summary of Hey Jude is that it was recorded over 2 days at Trident Studios, the 31st of July and the 1st of August 1968. And on the first day, John played the acoustic guitar, Paul played the piano, George was on electric guitar, and Ringo was on drums. And they did the backing track. Paul did provide a lead vocal just to help people keep into the sense of the song, and that was wiped. On the next day, Paul played his bass guitar, Paul did the lead vocal, George and John did the wonderful backing vocals, and Paul recorded the swear words. And that's what's in Mark Lewisham. And if you didn't know that, you would still be able to prove that these two pieces are intentional, because when they came to do the video, George, John's and Ringo's stuff is from the single. They simply are miming, but Paul is playing piano and he is singing live. And the camera's on them. It's on a television studio. There's hundreds of people in the studio right around the Beatles, and we can watch it to this day. And the way it goes is Paul's sideways and he's going, "Remember to let her under your skin." Then it cuts to frontways and it goes, "Oh, then you begin to make it better." Now, Paul could obviously not swear in an environment like that, but he goes out of his way to show you. He breaks the whole line of the song by putting it into the main vocal line because he can't double track it. It's there. So for me, that is part of the lyric, and that's how I treat it. If you can't explain the whole song, its lyrics, the whispered parts, the crescendo, and the long coda, then you really can't explain Hey Jude. You could maybe get to some of it, but you won't get to it all. They're all part of it. But when I was 11 and I started to think about the song, the first thing I noticed was the relationship to Cole Porter. "I've got you under my skin" being the song in question. And there we have it, "the minute you let her under your skin." And whereas he goes then, "I've got you deep in the heart of me," Paul puts the heart in, but he changes the words, "remember to let her into your heart." So I thought, yeah, that's got something to do with Hey Jude. But that ended up being a red herring. It's a mere tribute to Cole Porter. It has nothing to do with the ultimate destination where Hey Jude gets to what you should do that will make things better. It's not the first time that the Beatles have tributed the Jazz Age greats. We know Bing Crosby is featured in Please Please Me. You probably don't know that George and Ira Gershwin, their song I've Got Rhythm is both lyrically and musically the foundation of Can't Buy Me Love. But you've got to listen to the introductory section to see that. You probably don't know that another George and Ira Gershwin song is explicitly mentioned in Things We Said Today. And a third one, Stairway to Paradise, affected the chords of a Beatles song. So there's plenty of Jazz Age stuff, let alone things like When I'm 64, which is inspired again by the Gershwins, and the Beatles loved those people and they frequently tributed to them, but that's just a friendly tribute. Then I started to wrestle with the challenges in the Beatles here in this song. The second and the third sections do not make sense together. In the second session, you were made to go out and get her. This is your purpose in life, your very purpose in life. It's the reason why you exist. You were made to go out and get her. And yet, at any time you feel the pain, Hey Jude refrain, don't carry the world upon your shoulder, or don't carry your life upon your shoulder. Who's ever heard of someone saying, now that you've found purpose in your life, just avoid challenges? It's bizarre. But it's by no means the most bizarre contradiction in the song. The most bizarre one, the truly inexplicable one, and it's so intentionally obvious. You were made to go out and get her, and you have found her, now go out and get her. And yet, you're waiting for someone to perform with. And don't you know, it's just you. Hey Jude, you'll do. You don't need anyone else. So what's going on here? This is not some loose, lazy writing. This is a deliberate, fundamental contradiction, and it needs to be resolved if you want to understand Hey Jude. And I couldn't make head or tail of it. It's a thing that really is a stumbling block. And beyond that, also, there is manipulation. The narrative voice is not neutral. So the first thing to notice is that the narrator acknowledges there's something that you might have cause to be afraid of in what's going on in the lyric. Now, initially I thought, of course, starting a new relationship, there's always a little bit of trepidation about that. But it can't be that, because you're waiting for someone to perform with, and don't you know it's just you. So you can't except that there's another thing that's causing you to have reason for fear, which is why the narrator then ups the pressure by saying, "Hey Jude, don't let me down." And this line is manipulative. "If you don't do this, I won't think as highly of you as I do now. You'll be letting me down." This is the one line in the song, now that I know what the song's about, that I think Paul McCartney regretted, because it oversteps the mark. Everywhere else, this is words of encouragement and support, and here, this is words of expectation and obligation. You'll be letting him down if you don't do it. And so there's something going on that is not something you would naturally do. It's something he's encouraging you to do, and then he's kind of manipulating you into doing it. That's how it seems. It's a strange set. You know, there are 6 places where the word her is in the lyric, and yet you're waiting for someone to perform with. This contradiction is similar to other contradictions in the Beatles, and it's a way of saying to the listener, to John in this case, there's something in here that you should pay attention to. You'll get if you pay attention. It was part of the Beatles' secret code, because they didn't actually say to each other, "I've written this song for you." That wasn't cool, because sometimes the songs have a payload that is unpleasant, that you might not even be able to say directly. So you write a song about it, and you put it in indirectly into the song, and you include various things such as deliberate contradiction to make the other person pay attention, to think about it, and then they'll get it, because they know more or less how you write, but they don't know exactly what you're saying. Another part of the secret code is found in Hey Jude as well, which is the use of highly original expressions. Now, John was pedantic in language, and he taught Paul the same thing. We're going to see in how screamingly funny John's pedantry is with language as we look at the Beatles songs. But highly original expressions are both John and Paul's specialities, and here the line is, "The movement you need is on your shoulder," which kind of matches to this strange line, "So let it out and let it in." Considering that 5-year-old Julian is purported to be the person to whom the song is directed, and the person you're to let it into your heart is purported to be Yoko Ono, let it out and let it in it just sounds off. But the movement you need is on your shoulder. It could suggest one of 2 things. Figuratively, it brings to mind the old hymn, "Put your shoulder to the wheel, move along, move along." Or else the expression, "Put your shoulder into it." In other words, get going, get acting. This is a positive instruction. On the other hand, and this is where these 2 lines are connected, at a literal meaning, the movement you need is on your shoulder means hold your wrist and your elbow and your arm perfectly still and just move your shoulder. And if you want to get a precise, small, accurate movement of something you're holding, that's the way to do it. And so we've got a choice here. Is this something literal, in other words, something requiring high precision, or is it something figurative? Is it just get moving? The sense may be that it is the latter, that it's figurative, because it's asking you to do something, to do it, begin, but not necessarily so. Now, there are 5 places where you are asked to start something or to begin something, and then when you do begin, up comes the joy, and yet you're waiting for someone to perform with, and don't you know it's just you. So I would say this: the words of the song, with all their contradictions and problems, the whispers, the music, and the crescendo, the coda, every aspect comes to play a role in the meaning. And if you pick and choose, and say, "Oh, I'm focusing on this," and ignoring that, you won't get it. Hey Jude is one of those songs which is wholly composed. One of the interesting parts of it is the na-na-na coda at the end of the long extended coda. It's written around 4 megachords. They play the same 4 chords over and over in a repeating sequence. And these chords are structured as a double plagal cadence, believe it or not. normal song endings have a perfect cadence, which would be a 5 chord followed by 1, or a 4-5-1, something like that. Da da, and it's definite. And that's not just rock and roll, that's also classical music. It's the most common way of ending songs. A plagal cadence is a softer 4-1, and it's the Amen cadence from the Wesleyan hymn. So it's called the Amen cadence. And Paul puts two of them back to back. They're not the same one, they're two 4-1 sequences. Double plagal cadence. And this infuses the song with a sense of spirituality. Not only the exultant moment, but then the ongoing double plagal cadence subtly suggests something that could be life-changing. So that's Hey Jude. That's as far as I got. Now, looking at what John Paul said, the most interesting is the first quote, because it's only 3 sentences. And in these 3 sentences, 2 sentences really, and in those 2 sentences, John makes 3 separate claims about Hey Jude, and they are incompatible with each other. So already at the beginning, we know how you can't use the Beatles statements when they talk about their songs. This was made in 1972 to the Hit Parader magazine. Talking about Hey Jude. Paul, that's his best song, so that's not part of the meaning. It started off as a song about my son Julian, because Paul was going to visit him. Then he turned it into Hey Jude. I always thought it was about me and Yoko, but he said it was about him and his. So it started off as a song about Julian because he was going to visit him, so that's one meaning. I thought it was about me and Yoko, but that's John's interpretation. Remember, he thinks he's got the alerts, there's something in there about you, but he said it was about him and his. In other words, Paul and Jane Asher, his longtime girlfriend. He'd been with her for 5 years at the time he wrote Hey Jude. So we've got to choose between 3 things. In 1980, in his final long interview about the Beatles to Playboy magazine, he drops the Paul and me and him and his, and it's just Julian. He said, yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with it. Paul said, it was written about Julian, my child. He knew I was splitting with Sin and leaving Julian. Paul was driving to say hi to Julian. He'd been like an uncle to him, you know. Paul was always good with him, and so he came up with Hey Jude. And that's all he says. So the song's about Julian. But I always thought it was about me, you know, and he says, Paul was subconsciously saying, go ahead, leave me, and go with Yoko. But on a conscious level, he didn't want me to go ahead. The angel in him was saying, bless you, which is an interesting thing because that's another of these coded songs with deliberate contradiction, and it's deeply meaningful in the Beatles. And the devil in him didn't want to lose his partner. He believes the song's about with him and Yoko, but then why you're waiting for someone to perform with, he doesn't deal with that. What it is you're to begin, given that Yoko was already pregnant. They'd been together for 6 weeks by the time Paul wrote Hey Jude, and Paul had about 4 or 5 days in which he'd interacted with Yoko. So he had no knowledge that this was going to be a forever thing for John. Nothing at all. So it's a bit fanciful, and it's like looking at things with hind knowledge. If you know how the future turns out, you could see that it could be about Yoko. But if you looked at it from June 1968, with Paul only having briefly come to know her, really, it's unlikely. Anyway, that's John's thing. And of course, if it's about Julian, we have this rather awkward thing that you're waiting for someone to perform with. You have found her, now go and get her. You are made to go out and get her. And that's about Yoko. That was the thing I was struggling with. In 1990, 10 years later, I worked out what Hey Jude was actually about. I did what John doesn't seem to have done. In Paul's authorized biography, his biographer, Barry Miles, essentially says the song has no specific meaning. However, Paul himself said it was about Julian. And he talks a lot about how children can be traumatized by divorces, and he loved Julian, and you can see he had a great relationship with Julian. And guilt is such a terrible thing, and children internalize, it's almost like abuse, you internalize something and say, well, am I the reason why this didn't work out? And you just don't know, and you're scared, and Daddy doesn't behave to me like he used to, and all that things. And then he talks about that line, the movement you need on your shoulder, and how he was playing it to John and Yoko, and he said, I'm going to change that, don't worry. And John said, no, you won't, that's the best line, and how wonderful that is, and how meaningful it is. And that's what he said in 1997. In his 1997 thing, he says something, and this is a great example of why you can't trust the Beatles when they talk about their stuff. Because not only do they not say things, the truthful things, but also they avoid saying things. So he says, I remember taking it down to a late night hashish smoking club in a basement in Tottenham Court Road, the Vesuvio Club. We were sitting on beanbags, which was the thing. And I said to the DJ, here's an acetate. In other words, he'd just got a temporary disc made in the studio. Do you want to slip it in sometime? He played it, and I remember Mick Jagger coming up, effing hell, that's really something. It's like 2 songs. It wasn't intended to go on that long in the end, but I was having such fun ad-libbing over the end when we put down the original track that I went on a long time. So then we built it with the orchestra, but it was mainly because I just wouldn't stop doing that. Judy, Judy, wow, Cary Grant on heat. And so we now know that Jude is not Jules, but is Judy, which you can hear in the song. Jules is never mentioned, but in the coda it becomes Judy. Now the big thing that's missing in this statement, and it's a really awful thing, it wasn't just he went to the Vesuvio Club. There was a big deal going on that night in the Vesuvio Club. The Rolling Stones were presenting for their first time to the select group of friends their brand new album, Beggar's Banquet. And Paul hijacked it by playing Hey Jude and just took the limelight. Now this was the first of the 4 greatest Rolling Stones albums. The great single, Jumping Jack Flash, is not on that album, but it accompanied the album. And this was when the Rolling Stones started to become the world's greatest rock and roll band, as they were marketed for several years after that. So Beggar's Banquet was huge for them, and the night was hijacked by Paul, but he doesn't mention that, does he? But he does also say here that the ad-libbing wasn't intended to go on that long. And in the same interview, he says the end refrain was never a separate song. And we can see that because before they recorded it at Twickenham, they also did 3 recordings in the EMI studios, which we now know as Abbey Road Studios. And there's the refrain. So there was always going to be a refrain. So Hey Jude, that's Paul, the Rolling Stones debut, and he doesn't talk about that. If you want to read about it, is one of the greatest Beatles books, just as a fun read, is 1, 2, 3, 4. And that story is wonderfully accounted in 1, 2, 3, 4. It was a mortifying time for the Rolling Stones to be upskilled like that. In 1999, that therefore is the songs about Julian. The refrain was always there. I didn't want it to go on so long. Now we're going to challenge all of those things. Firstly, in 2021, Paul gave his second explanation for Hey Jude. He focuses on, again, the movement you need is on your shoulder, and it was a delicate moment and how meaningful it is to him. And then he goes on to say, I started writing the song about Julian, and then I decided to make it less obvious, and I changed it to Hey Jude. Once I did that, I recognised I could open it up. I might as well just go for it. And so then I started just write lines about, compassion, and I came to write about a girl, and so she enters the picture, and of course the girl never enters the picture. He's not talking to a girl, he's talking to a man who's interested in a girl, or at least that's one reading of it. And so the song ended up being about nothing. It has no meaning. It started off as Julian, and I just extemporized on themes of compassion. And then he says another element that was added to the song is the refrain, directly contradicting what he had said 20 years earlier. Then he goes on to say a new piece of information that I swore, and that's what you can hear in the background. And as I said, the swearing is intentionally placed there. So he's changed his story. It's not about Julian, it's just about general words of kindness. The refrain was added, it wasn't there always, and the swearing was a result of me playing the wrong piano chords. As to the question of length, there is quite an interesting story behind Hey Jude. When it first came out as a single, it was mono only, 7 minutes 21 seconds long. And that was in September 1968. However, in February 1970, the stereo version was released on the Hey Jude album, and it was 7 minutes 11 seconds long. So we have two different times, out by about 10 seconds, for the same song, just because they were cut differently. This ends up interesting. For example, the opening song on my favourite album, Crosby, Stills and Nash, is Sweet, Judy Blue Eyes, commonly thought of as being concerned with Judy Collins, but if you listen to the lyric, there's something else going on in it as well as Judy Collins. There's another Judy, and it came out in 1969, and that song is 7 minutes and, believe it or not, 21 seconds long. George Harrison, on his first album, included a song that was initially critical of both John and Paul, but by the time that album came out, which was mid-1970, 1.5 years after he wrote it during the Let It Be sessions, isn't it a pity he decided to make it focused on Paul in its nastiness? And so what he did, he made it 7 minutes 11 seconds long, because of course the Hey Jude, which had just come out and which he had clearly, was the LP version. So it's 7 minutes 11 long, and you can hear it has the same idea of 4 repeating chords going endlessly through the end of the song. He made that. That is his way of focusing his song on Paul, no longer John and Paul. So Hey Jude has an interesting story in relation to time, but its most interesting one concerns Paul's statement, "We never intended it to be that long." Well, this can be tested. The first way is just by listening to the practice sessions. We've got 2 of them on Anthology 3. There's one, but the very first practice session is on the White Album in its new Super Deluxe edition. It's on disc 5 of that album. And the first version, it has the original lyric that we talked about, and it is 40 seconds shorter than the single. So it's 6 minutes 40 something seconds instead of 7 minutes 20. It has the long coda, it has the going up. It's essentially the same song. So to say we never intended to go that long, well, maybe not that long, but pretty close to it. 6 minutes 40 seconds it's immaterial when you're dealing with that length of a song. However, here's an interesting fact that really does put Paul a big question mark around that length. Not the kind of length, by the way, that we talk about when we talk about Long Tall Sally, the length of time. So, on the 25th of June, Paul comes back from the United States. 26th of June, he's writing Hey Jude. In the United States, on the week of the 22nd of June, in other words, the week he was there, MacArthur's Park by film star Richard Harris, who had decided to become a pop star, reached all the way to number 2 on the charts. It was the very first single ever made that was over 7 minutes long, and it nearly got to number 1. Goodness me, that would have been a first. How long is MacArthur Park, you may ask? Why? It's 7 minutes and 21 seconds long. So when Paul says, we never intended it to be that long, it just got carried away in the jamming and it just ended up that long. This is highly debatable. It's more debatable when you consider that the vocal that he put on was on the second day, but the musical instrumentation was on the first day, and they already knew that was going to be such a big thing that even before the session, on the 30th, before the first session where they lay down the instrumental tracks, they already ordered the orchestra, according to Mark Lewisham. So before they even recorded the song, they knew they'd have a really extended coda, so much so that it was worthwhile not just playing it, but having a great big orchestra of 32 people come and do those 4 chords over and over again. So in my view, it's an interesting case study because you can see why you can't trust Paul, or John for that matter, when they talk about their songs. Just about any detail of their songs, it's a little sus. Paul wanted to have the first number 1 hit that was more than 7 minutes long, and he chose the length of time to be exactly the same length of time as MacArthur Park, the song that had given him the idea. And that's why we see in Sweet Judy Blue Eyes the exact same time. We see the exact same time for George Harrison for Isn't It a Pity as we see for the stereo version, which had come out just before George did that. So this is how things work. Little details in the Beatles are surprisingly important. You really have to look if you want to see how they talk to each other. The detail counts. Paul has said, we wrote a secret code. Now, there is certainly a lot going on in Hey Jude, and if you follow what I've said today, and you follow what I'm going to say next week, you will be able to work out for yourself what Hey Jude is actually about. I look forward to seeing you soon. If you liked today, please press the like button. If you'd like to have more, press the subscribe button, but you must also do the notify, because otherwise you will not be notified when a new video is on. All you'll see is if you look at your list of subscribers, it will come up for a day or so in that list. Please drop a comment if there's anything here that you agree with or disagree with or find fascinating. I'd love to hear that. If you think you know the meaning of Hey Jude, pop it down. I'd like to invite you to follow me for the next 300 odd episodes as we work through systematically the meanings of their songs, which unfortunately means Hey Jude's going to come out in about 180th. It's a way down the track. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be discussing the difference between authorial intent and meaning, because I'm not so much interested in meaning. It's a bit naive. I'm interested in authorial intent because the Beatles' songs are actually a private conversation in the public domain. And so, who's it addressed to? Why did they write it? What did they want to say to them? Those kind of things, authorial intent, are where I go. Thank you very much for listening.